The stars hung like tiny cold lanterns in the endless black of space. Out here, far from the warm heart of Earth's colonies, the night sky seemed deeper, heavier, almost alive. Vega Outpost 9, a small human settlement on the edge of explored space, floated quietly around its pale blue sun. Commander Elias Rourke stood alone on the observation deck, his hands resting on the railing as he stared out into the void. The glass in front of him was crystal clear, and beyond it, the stars looked close enough to touch. He had been in the military for 20 years, and he had seen battles, chaos, and blood. But tonight, everything was still. Too still. Down below, inside the colony domes, life moved in its quiet routines. The miners from the asteroid belts had just come in on the shuttle, tired and covered in dust. The engineers in the maintenance bay were finishing repairs on the old defense turrets, machines so outdated, most people doubted they would even fire if needed. It had been 6 months since they last heard directly from Earth Command. Out here, messages traveled slowly, and with the new reports of raider activity in nearby systems, the communications relay had been patchy. Some colonists whispered that Earth had forgotten them. Others believed Earth simply had bigger problems to deal with. Rourke wasn't the type to believe in rumors, but even he could not ignore the feeling in his gut. Something was wrong. Lieutenant Kara Vance entered the deck quietly, holding a data tablet against her chest. She was young, too young, Rourke thought, for a place like this. Her eyes, however, carried a sharpness that came from experience. "Commander," she said, stepping up beside him, "long-range scans are clean. No ships in the sector, except for the mining freighter heading to dock." Rourke gave a slow nod but didn't take his eyes off the stars. "You ever get the feeling the quiet's not real, Lieutenant?" Kara glanced at him. "You mean, like it's waiting for something?" Exactly. They stood there in silence, for a moment. Below them, lights flickered across the colony like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. In the distance, the defense perimeter satellites blinked with their automated beacons, each one an old soldier standing watch. The sound of the deck doors opening again drew Rourke's attention. Chief Engineer Thomas Hale stepped inside, brushing asteroid dust from his uniform. His face was weathered, his hair streaked with gray, and his eyes had the tired look of a man who had worked too many double shifts. "Commander," Hale said with a slight grin, "you'll be happy to know your precious defense grid is back online. At least for now. The capacitors are shot, but I've rerouted power from the hydroponics section to keep them running." Rourke finally turned from the stars. "Good work, Chief. Let's hope we won't need them." Hale chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Hope's a nice thing to have, Commander. But I trust working guns more." Kara smirked. "That's assuming these guns actually work." The three of them shared a small laugh, but it faded quickly. The colony's intercom crackled to life. "Commander Rourke, report to the control center," a voice said. It was Ensign Morgan from comms. There was a slight edge in his tone. Rourke exchanged a look with Kara, then started walking toward the deck doors. "Chief, come with us. If something's wrong, I want engineering on standby." They moved quickly through the narrow metallic corridors of the station. The hum of the oxygen recyclers echoed softly in the walls. Most of the civilian population was already indoors, some in the mess hall, others in their small, cramped quarters. When they arrived at the control center, Morgan was standing at his console, eyes locked on the screen. "What is it?" Rourke asked. "Picking up a signal," Morgan said slowly. "It's faint. Could be a comm burst, but the encoding is strange." Kara leaned over his shoulder. "Strange how?" Morgan tapped a few keys. "Not our encryption. Not Earth's. Not any of the standard Alliance codes. Could be a merchant broadcast," Hale offered. Morgan shook his head. "No, it's not civilian. This is military-grade compression. But it's not human." The room went silent. Rourke walked to the center of the room. How far? About 6 light hours away, Morgan replied. Could be closer, hard to say with the distortion. I'm running it through the filters. Now, Kara frowned. If it's not human, what are the odds it's friendly? Hale snorted. Out here? 0. Rourke's jaw tightened. Keep scanning. I want to know if there's more of them. Morgan nodded, fingers flying over the controls. After a tense moment, the screen updated. A cluster of faint energy signatures began to take shape. Multiple contacts, Morgan whispered. Maybe 20. No, wait, 25. All moving toward us. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Alert the colony, Rourke said calmly. Tell the defense crews to get to their stations. Kara hesitated. Sir, should we try to contact them? Not until we know what they are. Morgan's voice was tight. Commander, they just increased speed. They're closing in fast. Hale cursed under his breath. In the hangar, alarms began to sound. Red lights pulsed along the walls. Civilian workers dropped tools and ran for cover. Pilots rushed toward the small number of fighters they had, most of them old and patched, together from spare parts. Rourke moved to the main display. Put them on the big screen. The room darkened as the projection came to life. Against the black backdrop of space, faint outlines of ships could be seen, long, jagged shapes that looked nothing like human designs. Their formation was tight, their movement deliberate. Predators in the dark. Kara whispered, They're not even trying to hide now. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Because they think no one's here to stop them. Outside the station, the defense. Satellites turned slowly, their aging sensors locking onto the approaching fleet. The colony's old cannons hummed to life, their barrels tracking invisible targets in the void. And still, the enemy came closer. Inside, civilians huddled together in the lower levels. Children asked questions their parents couldn't answer. In the control center, the screen filled with red warning symbols. Morgan's voice was shaking now. Commander, they'll be in weapons range in 30 minutes. Rourke's mind raced. 30 minutes until an unknown enemy force reached them. 25 ships, maybe more. And all they had were a handful of outdated fighters and a defense grid that could barely power up. For a moment, he thought of sending a distress call to Earth. But deep down, he knew the truth. No one would come in time. At least that's what he believed. He turned to his crew, his voice calm but firm. Then we make them fight for every inch. The silence in the room broke as orders began flying. Crews moved into position. Weapons systems came online. Fighters began launching from the hangar bay. Rourke took one last look out at the stars. The enemy fleet was still far away, just tiny shapes against the endless black. But they were coming, and the silence was over. The enemy ships were closing fast. On the main display, their jagged outlines grew clearer with every passing minute. The silence of space made it all the more unsettling. There was no sound, no rumble of engines, only the quiet ticking of the colony's scanners as they locked onto each new contact. Commander Rourke stood in the center of the control room, arms folded, his eyes fixed on the red icons moving toward them. Every step the enemy took across that display felt like a heartbeat, bringing them closer to disaster. 20 minutes until they're in range, Morgan reported from the comm station. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as though speaking. Too loudly might draw the enemy in faster. Any response to our hail? Kara asked. Morgan shook his head. None. Either they're ignoring us, or they don't care to talk. Rourke wasn't surprised. Whoever these ships belonged to, they were moving like predators that had already chosen their prey. In the hangar bay, pilots rushed to their fighters. The deck crew worked frantically, fueling the ships and strapping on missile pods. The old interceptors were scratched and dented from years of service, some patched with mismatched armor plating scavenged from wrecks. But to the pilots, They were more than machines. They were the only line of defense between the colony and annihilation. One of the younger pilots, Ensign Dax Morrow, climbed into his cockpit, hands shaking as he buckled in. He glanced at the empty seat beside him where his wingman used to fly before an asteroid accident took him 2 months ago. "Guess it's just you and me today," he muttered to the ship itself. "Enemy fleet is spreading out," Kara reported. "They're trying to cover all angles." Rourke studied the tactical display. "They want to box us in. Keep the fighters close to the station. Don't let them draw you too far out." Morgan's console beeped sharply. "Sir, they've powered weapons." The control room fell silent. A moment later, the first blast came, an intense beam of crimson light cutting through the blackness of space. It struck one of the outer defense satellites, and the old structure erupted into a silent fireball, scattering debris across the void. "Shields up!" Rourke barked. The colony's shield generators hummed to life, surrounding the domes and hangar bays in a faint blue glow. The next volley came in seconds later. Plasma bolts slammed into the shields, rippling them like water. The control room's lights flickered under the strain. "They're testing our defenses," Kara said grimly. Rourke didn't answer. He was watching the way the enemy moved. Fast, coordinated, with a confidence that said they had done this many times before. "Return fire," he ordered. From the colony's surface, the ancient defense cannons rotated and fired bright streaks of energy into the void. A few found their targets, but most missed. The enemy ships were agile, darting between shots like wolves avoiding the swipe of a desperate prey animal. In the hangar bay, the first wave of human fighters launched into the battle. Engines flared blue as they streaked toward the enemy, weaving between bursts of enemy fire. Dax tightened his grip on the controls, his heart pounding. "This is Morrow going in on Vector 2-4. Let's see if these guys bleed." His wing of 3 fighters dove toward one of the smaller enemy craft. Missiles streaked away from their launchers, slamming into the target's hull. The alien ship spun out of formation, venting glowing gas before exploding into shards of metal. The small victory was short-lived. 2 enemy interceptors swooped in behind Dax's squadron, their weapons tearing through the lead fighter. It broke, apart in silence, its pieces scattering into the dark. Back in the control room, Morgan's voice was urgent. "We've lost contact with Alpha Squadron. Beta is taking heavy losses." Kara's hands flew across her console. "Commander, we can't win this battle in open space. We need to pull back and force them into the defense grid." Rourke nodded sharply. "Order all fighters to fall back to the inner perimeter. Keep them close to the station and let the cannons cover them." The retreat was messy. Enemy ships pressed hard, chasing the human fighters all the way back to the shield line. The defense. Cannons fired continuously, the heat from their barrels making their metal glow. Another blast rocked the colony, throwing several crew members off their feet. "Shields down to 70%, Kara called out. Morgan looked up from his station. "Sir, incoming transmission from the enemy." The voice that came through was deep and cold, the translation software struggling to keep pace. "Surrender your world. There is no escape." Rourke stared at the comms panel for a long moment. "Tell them," he paused, his voice hardening, "they'll have to take it from us." The enemy didn't reply. Instead, their ships began to close in even tighter. The battle for Vega Outpost 9 had only just begun. The enemy fleet stopped just beyond the colony's inner defense line, their ships forming a dark wall against the stars. The silence after the last volley of fire was almost worse than the battle itself. In the control room, every crew member's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, waiting for the next move. "They've halted weapons fire," Kara reported, cautiously, though her hand stayed on the controls. "They're not retreating," Rourke said quietly. "They're just watching." Morgan's console chimed. "Sir, incoming transmission, same source as before." The speakers hissed, and then the alien voice filled the room. Harsh, deep, and guttural, it made the translation software strain. to match each sound with human words. Humans of Vega Outpost, you are surrounded. Your defense is weak. Your fleet is far away. Surrender your world, and your deaths will be quick. Refuse, and none will survive. The words echoed through the control room. No one moved. Kara's jaw tightened. They know we're alone. They think we're scared. Hale muttered from the back, his voice like gravel. Rourke stepped toward the comms station. Open a channel. Morgan hesitated, but obeyed. You're live, Commander. Rourke spoke slowly, his voice carrying a calm that masked the storm in his chest. This is Commander Elias Rourke of Vega Outpost 9. We do not surrender our homes. If you want this colony, you'll have to fight for it. For a few seconds, the only sound was static. Then the alien voice returned, colder than before. So be it. The transmission cut. Within moments, the enemy fleet began to move again. This time, their formation shifted, splitting into multiple attack groups. Smaller ships darted forward while the larger warships stayed back, their massive cannons. Powering up, Kara's voice was sharp. They're targeting infrastructure. They're not trying to breach the shield directly. They're aiming for our life support systems. On the colony surface, explosions lit the night as precision strikes tore into the outer power grid. The shields held, but the systems feeding them groaned under the strain. Power levels dropping, Hale reported from the engineering console. If they keep this up, we'll lose the grid in under an hour. In the lower levels of the colony, civilians huddled together in the shelters. The dull hum of the shield generators was their only comfort, but even that was broken by the distant tremors of impacts. Children clung to their parents, asking if help was coming. No one had the courage to answer. Back in the control room, the situation grew worse. Food storage dome hit, Kara called out. We've lost half our supplies. They're trying to starve us out, Rourke said grimly. Force us to break without firing a final shot. The enemy's tactics were clear now. They would cripple the colony, cut off its lifeline, and then close in for the kill. Morgan's hands trembled slightly over the comms board. Sir, should we try another distress call to Earth? Rourke looked at him for a long moment. He wanted to say yes, to believe that a fleet would appear out of the void to save them. But he had been on the frontier too long to hold such illusions. Send it, he said at last. But don't expect an answer. Morgan nodded and began transmitting the desperate message into the emptiness of space. Another explosion rocked the station, throwing sparks from one of the overhead panels. Smoke began to fill the air, and Hale cursed as he tried to reroute power from the undamaged sectors. Shields at 60%, Kara warned. If they drop below 40, we won't survive the next push. Rourke straightened, his eyes hard. Then we make every shot count. Ready all remaining fighters for a counterstrike. The control room came alive with activity. Pilots were recalled, weapons were reloaded, and the colony's cannons turned toward their nearest targets. Outside, the enemy fleet moved like predators circling an injured prey. And somewhere deep inside Rourke, a thought he tried to ignore whispered in his mind. If help didn't come soon, this would be their last night. The air inside the control room felt heavier now, as if the enemy's presence outside had somehow seeped into the station itself. The crew moved quickly but spoke little. Every person knew the truth. If the shields failed, there would be no second line of defense. Commander Rourke stood over the central tactical display, watching the red icons shift across the map. The enemy ships were closing in tighter, their attack pattern forming a noose around Vega Outpost 9. There was no gap, no escape route. Report, he said. Kara's voice was steady but grim. Shields holding at 55%. Enemy groups Alpha and Delta have stopped firing. They're repositioning, my guess. They're setting up for a concentrated strike on the east sector. Hale glanced up from engineering. That's where the secondary generator is. If they take that out, the shield grid collapses. Rourke nodded. Then that's where we make our stand. In the hangar bay, the pilots prepared for what might be their final mission. Mechanics worked in silence, tightening bolts, checking fuel lines, loading missiles. The smell of engine coolant and scorched metal hung in the air. Ensign Dax Morrow sat in his cockpit, running through the pre-launch sequence. He glanced at the picture taped to his console, a faded photo of his younger sister back on Earth. He had told her he'd be home by the end of the year. Now he wasn't sure he'd live to see another sunrise. "Control, this is Morrow," he said into his headset. "Alpha Squadron ready for launch on your order." The colony's civilians had been moved to the deepest shelters, sealed behind blast doors and reinforced bulkheads. The corridors above were nearly empty now, save for security teams patrolling with rifles clutched tightly in their hands. The distant rumble of impacts vibrated through the floors, each one reminding them that the enemy was still out there, still waiting. In the control room, Morgan adjusted his headset. "Commander, enemy ships have split into 3 assault groups. East Sector strike team is moving fast, ETA 12 minutes. Rourke turned to Kara. "I want the fighters in position to intercept. Use the defense cannons for covering fire. Don't let them through." "Yes, sir." The next minutes passed in a tense rhythm. Fighters launched from the hangar, streaking into the void with blue engine trails behind them. Defense cannons tracked and locked onto targets, their targeting, systems humming softly. From his position on the observation deck, Rourke watched as the first enemy ships entered visual range. They were like nothing human engineers would design, sharp, blade-like hulls with glowing red patterns along their flanks, as if the ships themselves were alive and pulsing with energy. "They're not slowing down," Kara reported over comms. Then, "Neither do we," Rourke said. The first exchange came quickly. Human fighters dove into the enemy's path, launching missiles and strafing with rapid-fire cannons. Explosions lit up the darkness, some enemy ships breaking apart in flashes of fire, others pushing through without pause. The colony's ground-based cannons roared, sending streaks of energy into the oncoming wave. 2 enemy interceptors were hit and spun out of control, colliding with each other before erupting into debris, but the enemy was relentless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Shields at 47%, Hale called out. "Generators are straining. I'm diverting emergency power from life support." "Do it," Rourke ordered without hesitation. "We can't breathe if we're dead." In space, Dax's fighter banked hard to avoid a plasma blast. "This is Morrow. Enemy breaking through our left flank. We need cover." Rourke's hand tightened on the railing as he watched the battle unfold. The defense line was bending, fighters scattering to avoid destruction. If the east sector fell, the enemy would have a direct path to the colony's heart. "Pull back to the generator grid," Rourke commanded. "Protect that sector at all costs." The comms lit up with acknowledgments. The fight shifted closer to the colony's surface, the void around it now alive with streaks of fire, flashes of light, and the silent bursts of exploding ships. In those desperate moments, there was no past, no future, only survival. The colony's shield shimmered with every impact, a fragile wall between life and death. And deep inside, Rourke knew that if the enemy decided to push, with their full strength, the wall would not hold. Still, he kept his voice steady. "We hold them here. This is our line. No one crosses it." The battle raged on, the stars themselves flickering under the light of war. And in the darkness beyond the enemy fleet, somewhere unseen, something else was watching. Something that had not yet chosen to reveal itself. The battle outside raged on, but inside the control room, the only sound was the rapid clicking of keys and the constant beeping of the scanners. The shields were holding for now, but they were dimming, their once bright glow now a faint blue shimmer. Every few seconds, another impact made the floor tremble beneath their feet. Lieutenant Kara Vance sat hunched over her console, her eyes scanning lines of data. She had been monitoring enemy movement when something unexpected appeared on her. Secondary display. A faint, irregular spike on the long-range sensors. "Commander," she said, frowning. "I'm picking up something. Far side of the system. Could be a distortion or interference, but it's unusual." Rourke didn't look away from the main battle display. "We're in the middle of a fight, Lieutenant. Could it be a ghost? Signal from their jamming?" "Maybe," Kara admitted. "But it's different. This isn't their frequency, and it's coming from well outside their formation." Chief Engineer Hale leaned over to glance at her screen. "Probably just debris. Long-range scans pick up all kinds of junk in a firefight." Kara shook her head. "No, it's too steady for debris. It's moving. Fast." That made Rourke turn. "How fast?" "Faster than any civilian ship," Kara replied. "Closer to military-grade speed. But I can't lock it in. It keeps flickering in and out, like it's masking its signal." Morgan at comms glanced up. "Sir, if it's masking its signal, that means it doesn't want to be found. Could be more enemy ships on the way." The thought hung in the air like a shadow. Another wave of enemy ships was the last thing they could handle right now? "Distance?" Rourke asked. "Too far to be a threat yet," Kara said. "At current speed, it would take them about an hour to reach us. That's assuming it's coming here at all. Then we focus on the fight. In front of us," Rourke decided. "Keep tracking it, but don't let it distract you from the battle." Outside, the colony's defense cannons roared again, striking one of the enemy cruisers dead center. The alien vessel broke apart in a silent, fiery burst. Cheers erupted, briefly in the hangar and control room, but they died as quickly as they had begun. Another enemy ship slid into the fallen cruiser's place, weapons already blazing. Hale's voice came over the comms from engineering. "Commander, I'm not going to lie to you. We've got maybe 30 minutes left on the shields before they collapse. Less if they hit the secondary generator." Rourke's face remained unreadable, but his grip on the railing tightened. "Then we make 30 minutes count." Kara's console beeped again. She glanced at it, then froze. "What is it?" Rourke asked. "The signal. It's stronger now," she said slowly. "It's not just one contact anymore. I'm reading dozens. No, hundreds, all moving in formation." The control room went quiet. Morgan stared at her screen. "That's impossible. There's no way a fleet that size could get this close without us detecting them earlier." "They're using some kind of deep space masking," Kara said, her voice low. "I've never seen anything like it. It's human technology, but advanced. Way beyond anything we have here." Rourke's mind raced. A human fleet? Out here? It didn't make sense. Earth hadn't sent reinforcements in years. But the readings on Kara's display were real. Something big was out there, and it was coming closer. "Could be a trick," Hale warned. "They could be faking human signals to make us lower our guard." "Or," Rourke said slowly, "it could be exactly what it looks like." Another blast shook the station, and alarms wailed as the shields dropped to 42%. Rourke turned back to the main display. The enemy wasn't slowing down, and whatever was out there was still too far to help. For now, all they could do was hold and wait to see if the strange readings were hope or doom. The battle had reached a breaking point. The colony's shield flickered under each impact, its glow dimming like a dying ember. Inside the control room, the constant tremors from weapons fire made the floor feel unsteady beneath everyone's feet. Sweat dripped from brows, voices were tense, and no one dared speak of retreat. Kara's eyes stayed locked on her console. The strange contacts she had been tracking were closing in, faster now, their formation holding tight. Every few seconds, the signal grew clearer, sharper, like something was pulling away the veil that hid them. "Commander," she said, her voice careful but urgent, "that fleet, it's almost within visual range on the far side of the system." Rourke didn't look at her. His eyes were still on the main tactical display, where the enemy ships were pressing hard against the east sector. "Stay focused on the fight. Lieutenant, I won't count ghosts as allies until I see them with my own eyes." Another violent impact shook the station. A nearby console sparked, and one crewman stumbled, catching himself against the wall. Hale's voice came over the comms. "From engineering. Shields at 39%, Commander." "We're in the danger zone," Morgan called out from comms. "Enemy troop transports are moving into position. They're preparing for boarding operations." Rourke's jaw tightened. "All security teams to the east sector. Seal the inner. Blast doors." Even as he gave the order, his mind kept circling back to the strange readings Kara had found. Could it be reinforcements? Could it be Earth? Or was it another predator, drawn to the scent of blood in the water? Then it happened. Kara's console beeped loudly, drawing every head in the control room toward her station. Her eyes widened. "Sir, they're here." Rourke turned sharply. "Show me." She tapped a sequence, and the main view screen shifted from the battle in front of them to the distant black edge of the system. At first, there was nothing, only empty space and the faint light of distant stars. Then, one by one, points of light began to appear. They were small at first, like stars winking into existence. But they grew brighter, larger, their light cutting through the darkness like the first fires of dawn. The enemy fleet hadn't noticed yet. They were too focused. On the kill. Kara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Energy signatures massive. These ships are huge." On the screen, the shapes took form. Sleek, angular silhouettes emerging from shimmering distortions in space. Hyperspace gates bloomed open like great rings of light, and from them came warships, dozens at first, then hundreds. The formation was perfect. A wall of steel and light, moving with the precision of a single mind. Morgan stared at the display in disbelief. I know those designs. That's Terran Navy architecture. But there's no way. Earth hasn't deployed this many ships in decades." Kara nodded slowly, her eyes shining with something like hope. "Well, they did now." Still, Rourke didn't let himself believe it yet. He had seen too much to trust in miracles. "Open a secure channel. If they're real, I want to hear their voice." Before Morgan could respond, a deep, clear voice came over the comms, strong, commanding, and human. "Vega Outpost 9. This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Stroud of the Terran Armada. Hold your position. We're here to bring you home." The control room went silent. Then, for the first time that day, a sound that wasn't fear or anger filled the air. Cheers. Loud, desperate cheers from soldiers who had been certain they were about to die. Rourke exhaled slowly, his grip on the railing loosening. For the first time in hours, the weight on his chest eased. Out in the void, the lights of the approaching fleet burned brighter, their hulls reflecting the cold starlight. And as they advanced, the enemy fleet finally realized what was coming, for them. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The moment the Terran Armada broke through the darkness, the battlefield shifted. The enemy ships, once relentless and confident, hesitated. They had not expected this. They had come to crush a lonely, weakened outpost, but now they faced a force greater than anything they had imagined. In the control room, all eyes were on the view screen. The enemy fleet began to scatter, their formation breaking as they tried to adapt. Some powered weapons toward the new arrivals, while others veered away, engines burning at maximum thrust. Commander Rourke stood tall, his voice steady but carrying an edge of fire. "Patch me through to Admiral Stroud." Morgan worked. The controls. And a second later, the Admiral's face appeared on the main display. Stroud looked like a man carved from stone. Broad shoulders, a weathered face, eyes that burned with controlled fury. "Commander," Stroud said without preamble, "we're taking point. Your job is to hold the line until our second wave arrives. Rourke." nodded. Understood. We'll keep the east sector secure. Outside, the first Terran warships surged forward. Massive dreadnoughts led the charge, their armor thick, their engines glowing like twin suns. Behind them came agile frigates, weaving between the giants like wolves flanking a pack leader. And above them all, carriers released swarms of fighters that lit the void with their engine trails. The opening salvo shook space itself. Terran railguns thundered, their hypervelocity rounds tearing through enemy cruisers in single shots. Plasma batteries unleashed blinding streams of energy, slicing through hulls as if they were paper. Missiles screamed across the battlefield, each one finding its mark with deadly precision. The enemy fought back fiercely, unleashing everything they had. Bright explosions flared across the void as ships on both sides took damage. But for every Terran vessel that faltered, 3 enemy ships fell in fire. Inside Vega Outpost 9, the crew watched as the tide of battle turned before their eyes. Kara's voice trembled, not from fear, but from awe. "It's beautiful." Rourke didn't answer. His eyes tracked a group of enemy destroyers breaking off from the fight, angling toward the colony. "They're still coming for us," he said. "All weapons, target those ships." The colony's defense cannons roared again, joining the larger battle. One destroyer went up in flames instantly, but 2 more pressed forward. The shields screamed under their fire. Then, just as the colony's defenses were about to give, a shadow passed over them. A massive Terran dreadnought swept in, its hull blotting out the enemy's line of fire. From its forward batteries came a single blinding beam, a lance of pure energy that ripped the 2 destroyers apart in seconds. Comms crackled again. "Outpost 9, we've got your back," a Terran captain's voice said. The crew cheered again, but Rourke raised a hand for silence. The battle wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The enemy flagship was still out there, and it was moving, directly toward the Terran fleet. Stroud's voice came over the comms once more. "Commander, we're going for the heart. Keep your defenses up. When that flagship falls, this fight ends." On the view screen, the massive enemy vessel loomed, a black behemoth armed with weapons large enough to crack a moon. Its hull glowed with strange alien energy, and its cannons were already charging. The final clash was about to begin. The enemy flagship moved like a predator through the void, slow, deliberate, and full of deadly confidence. Its black armor absorbed the light of the surrounding stars, making it look like a piece of night itself had come alive. On Vega Outpost 9's view screen, it filled the frame, each section bristling with weapons. Massive energy cannons began to glow a deep crimson, the color growing brighter with every passing second. The air inside the control room felt heavy, as if even the crew could sense the weapon's growing power. Admiral Stroud's voice came through the comms. "Target their forward batteries. Fighters, keep them distracted. Dreadnought group, on me. We punch through, no matter the cost." The Terran armada surged forward. Frigates darted between enemy fire, launching torpedoes that left streaks of white smoke in space. Dreadnoughts fired salvo after salvo, railgun rounds slamming into the flagship's shields and sending ripples of light across its surface. Fighters swarmed like angry hornets, peppering the hull with rapid plasma bursts. The flagship answered with fury. One of its forward cannons fired, and a blinding lance of red energy tore through a Terran battleship. The vessel split in 2, its burning halves drifting apart into the black void. Kara gasped softly. "They just destroyed the Indomitable." Rourke's jaw tightened. "And they'll destroy more if we don't stop them." Admiral Stroud's flagship, the Resolute, cut through the chaos like a spear. Its heavy guns fired in perfect rhythm, pounding the enemy shields until they flickered and dimmed. But the enemy vessel was built for war. It refused to yield. On the colony, every person watched the live feed in silence. Engineers, medics, soldiers, All held their breath as the two Titans exchanged blow after blow. The enemy's crimson cannon charged again. This time it aimed directly at the Resolute. "Evasive!" Stroud's voice barked. The Terran flagship banked hard, but the beam grazed its starboard side. The hull shuddered, armor plates vaporizing, but the ship kept moving. Morgan's voice shook as she read the tactical display. "Their shield integrity is dropping. 70%, 55. They can't take much more." Rourke leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. "Come on, Admiral, just a little closer." Suddenly, a Terran carrier moved ahead of the Resolute, deploying something new. From its launch bays came a formation of massive unmanned strike drones, each the size of a small fighter, armed with a payload designed for one purpose: breaching the enemy's armor. They moved in perfect unison, swarming toward a weak point in the flagship's hull. The enemy tried to swat them away with point defense fire, but too many got through. One by one, the drones latched onto the hull and then detonated in brilliant bursts of light. The enemy's shields collapsed. "Now!" Stroud roared. Every Terran warship poured fire into the breach. Railgun rounds tore deep into the alien vessel's body, and plasma beams carved through its internal structure. The black armor cracked, glowing lines of molten metal spreading across its surface. The flagship's crimson cannon flared one last time, but it was too late. A final missile barrage struck its core, and with a soundless explosion that lit up. Half the system, the enemy flagship, was gone, reduced to drifting, burning fragments. In the control room, cheers erupted, echoing through every deck of Vega Outpost 9. Kara smiled for the first time in days. "They did it. We're saved." Rourke exhaled slowly, his eyes still on the fading light of the explosion. "It's not over yet," he said quietly, "but it's a start. Because out there, beyond the reach of their sensors, more shadows might be waiting." The battlefield was quiet now, but it was not the kind of silence that brought peace. Wreckage drifted across the void, burning metal, shattered hulls, fragments of ships that once carried hundreds of lives. Vega Outpost 9's view screen showed the aftermath in grim detail. Terran ships floated alongside the dead remains of enemy vessels, their lights flickering, some venting oxygen into the cold black of space. The stars, once bright, were now dim behind a haze of debris and smoke. Inside the control room, the cheers had faded. The reality of what they had lost was settling in. Commander Rourke scanned the fleet's status reports. The Indomitable, Starlance, and Echo's Flame gone. Several frigates and dozens of fighters destroyed. Hundreds of crew members gone forever. Morgan's voice was heavy as she read the casualty list. "So many. Too many." Kara's hands trembled slightly as she shut down her console. "We won, didn't we? Then why does it feel like we didn't?" Rourke didn't answer right away. He looked out at the drifting wreckage, knowing each twisted piece of metal carried a story, a family, a sacrifice. "Because victory always has a price," he said at last. A transmission came in from Admiral Stroud. His image appeared on the main display, his face lined with exhaustion. "Commander Rourke, the flagship is destroyed. The enemy fleet has scattered. We're beginning search and rescue. Keep your defenses active. We don't know if they'll return." Rourke nodded. "Understood, Admiral. And well fought." Stroud's eyes softened just for a second. "We fight for each other. That's what keeps us human." The rescue operations began. Shuttles moved between wrecks, pulling survivors from damaged ships. Medical teams worked around the clock. The colony opened its doors to the wounded, turning warehouses into makeshift hospitals. But even in the relief of finding survivors, there was a shadow. Kara noticed it first. Strange. Readings on the long-range sensors. "Sir, there's something out there, beyond the asteroid belt." Rourke moved to her station. The signal was faint, but it was there, a cluster of unknown energy signatures, moving slowly toward the system. "They're not running away," Morgan whispered. "They're regrouping." Rourke straightened, the weight of the next battle already pressing on his shoulders. "Tell Admiral Stroud and get every gun ready. This war isn't over." Out in the darkness, far beyond the drifting wreckage, the faint glimmers of enemy ships were growing brighter. The silence before the next storm had already begun. The alarm klaxons wailed through Vega Outpost 9, a deep pulsing sound that made the walls tremble. The colony's citizens froze where they stood, every ear tuned to the warning they feared most. The enemy had returned. On the main display, the long-range scan revealed them, dozens of enemy warships breaking through the asteroid belt. Their formation was tighter, their numbers greater than before. This was no scattered retreat. This was revenge. Commander Rourke stood in the command deck, hands gripping the railing. "This is it," he said quietly. "They want to finish what they started." Morgan's voice came from behind him. "Then we make sure they fail." Admiral Stroud's voice crackled over the fleet-wide comms. "All ships, form the wall. No one breaks through to the colony. We hold here, or we die here." The Terran Armada moved into position, forming a protective barrier between the enemy and the colony. Every gun turret turned outward. Every fighter was launched. In the hangars, ground troops loaded their weapons, ready for boarding attempts. The void between the two fleets seemed to hold its breath, and then it exploded into chaos. The first enemy wave hit like a tidal surge. Plasma fire ripped across the line, hammering Terran shields. Fighters screamed past each other, trading bursts of light in dizzying dogfights. The Resolute led the counterattack, its massive cannons tearing through enemy destroyers. But the enemy adapted quickly, focusing fire on weaker Terran ships. A frigate on the left flank went up in a ball of fire, its debris scattering across space. In the control room, Kara shouted, "They're trying to break the left side." "Not happening," Rourke growled. "Tell Red Squadron to intercept." The battle became a blur of light and death. Torpedoes streaked across the void, railguns thundered, and both fleets took brutal losses. Then, in the middle of the chaos, the enemy flagship appeared. Larger than the last one, its black hull glowed with strange, pulsing symbols. The sight of it seemed to draw all sound out of the room. Morgan whispered, "That thing. It's not here to fight. It's here to end us." Admiral Stroud's voice came through again, harder than steel. "All ships, on me. We take that thing down now, or none of us see tomorrow." The Resolute, along with every heavy Terran warship, left, turned toward the flagship. They fired everything they had, missiles, plasma beams, railgun rounds. The enemy flagship's shields rippled under the assault, but still held. The flagship answered with a weapon unlike anything they had seen before. A swirling beam of blue light erupted from its bow, cutting through 3 Terran ships in one strike. Rourke's jaw tightened. "We can't match that, unless—" He looked at Kara. "Get me the drone strike codes." Within moments, dozens of armed drones launched from Terran carriers. They moved fast, slipping through the chaos toward the flagship's underside, where the shield was weakest. One by one, they detonated in blinding flashes, shaking the massive vessel. "Shields are failing," Morgan shouted. 40%, 20, they're gone." Admiral Stroud's final command thundered across the fleet. "All fire, on their core, now!" Every Terran ship poured its fury into the breach. The enemy flagship's hull cracked, molten lines racing across it like veins of fire. Then, with a soundless, blinding explosion, it was gone, ripped apart into fragments that scattered into the endless dark. Silence fell again, but this time it was a silence of victory. On Vega Outpost 9, people wept, embraced, and looked to the stars with hope. The war wasn't over across the galaxy, but here, in this corner of space, humanity had stood its ground and won. Rourke turned to the crew, his voice steady. "We survived because we fought together. Remember that. Always. Far beyond the system, unseen and unknown, other threats still stirred in the shadows. But for now, the Terran flag flew high, and the colony slept under its protection.